into 4 sections, because once part of Khalid's tactic was when Khalid would take an area over, he then split the army into 4 sections. One army would be garrisoned there to hold whatever city or territory. One army would be sent back to get supplies. Whatever supplies were there, they'd be given to the other army, and that army would be told, that section, now go beyond and continue. And they would go on and continue. And then when they became tired, there'd be another army behind them that would refresh them. They would go, and he consistently 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. This method of dividing the soldiers in 4 like a cake is used now. It was used in the surge, wasn't it? Was the surge successful? Of course it was. But we don't have to thank American intelligence for that, which is an oxymoron. What we have to do is thank Khalid bin al-Waleed's genius. We thank Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a genius like Khalid bin al-Waleed to do those things. Because all of it leads back to him. Now Khalid, eventually, Omar, realizing that he had made a mistake to remove Khalid from his post, he reinstated Khalid. And Khalid continued on his mission. Until finally, Omar asked Khalid to retire. He said that Khalid had done his fair share. Khalid had fought with valor and bravery. He'd been responsible. He'd been the governor of Iraq. He'd ruled Iraq from Arabia. He hadn't even been in Iraq many times. He ruled it from there because he was so busy doing other things. But he asked Khalid bin Waleed to now rest. And as with any warrior, as with any great people of the past, you can see it in your own generation. People from the older generation, when they stop working, they usually die. There's nothing more for them to do, they're dead in a week. My grandfather stopped working, he was dead in a week. Khalid bin al-Waleed, he decided to retire to a place that he had in Homs, in Sham, in today's Syria. And before he died, he sat back on his bed and reclined, and he said, the sword of Allah had not fallen on the battlefield, but the sword of Allah is back in its sheath. Meaning that he never lost the battle, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to take him just while he was in his bed. When Khalid bin al-Waleed died, he was pretty much buried in his house. And there was a masjid called Masjid Khalid bin al-Waleed that stands in Homs today. And the place where people visit, where Khalid is actually entombed at, there's all this light and everything coming out of it, and it has a listing of all of the battles that Khalid has done. They call the city of Homs the city of Khalid bin al-Waleed. Sometimes people just refer to it as that, even though it had a previous history. But no one remembers what it was called before it was called Homs. No one has any idea. Now, how can we then best sum up what Khalid bin al-Waleed represents? How can we best sum him up? Here's what I think we can do to sum up Khalid bin al-Waleed. Khalid bin al-Waleed, when he died, which was 20 years after the Hijrah, Khalid bin al-Waleed had left behind numerous children. His sons and grandsons all fought as the heads of the armies of the Khalifas, all of them. And they were held to be as brilliant as Khalid. Same tactics, same planning, same intelligence. He had raised all of them up when they were small and put them through the same rigorous, grueling regime that he had been put through as a young boy all those years ago. Khalid bin al-Waleed, although not a hafiz of the Quran, not a massive scholar of several thousand different ahadith or different sciences in Islam, when you look at him historically, I remember seeing an entry about him in a book, in a library. And there was more about him than General Montgomery, than Patton, than all these great heroes. Khalid took up pages in a secular book about his battles and his inventions and his genius and his planning and his intelligence. He took up all these pages. And I thought to myself, subhanAllah, if only we could know all of that, then we would not waste our time sometimes following people that don't deserve our allegiance, associating ourselves with people that we shouldn't even associate with. We look out here and we look at people that we think that they have power or they have prestige, but not really. They don't have the same bravery that Khalid had. Nowadays, when people fight in war, people press a small red button from a room or some small faraway place. There's a smoke mushroom cloud or bright flash, and you don't see whoever was there anymore. Or we send over guided missiles or drones, and it's not the same as facing an enemy head to head and taking that person's life with a sword, or having to fight an enemy face to face, having to negotiate terms. The spirit of Khalid bin Waleed is still in this ummah. There are still people today and years ago in which Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi was called the re-emergence of Khalid bin Waleed. Or he was called the Khalid bin Waleed of his time because he used similar tactics. He had few resources. Baybars was called another Khalid bin Waleed. Right? Abdul Haq Burhanuddin, who led the Afghan war against the Russians, was called the Khalid bin Waleed of his age. Few resources, but big heart. And again, the Russian Empire, the greatest of its time, outnumbered 20 to 1, 22 to 1, 30 to 1. And Abdul Haq, who now, rahimahullah, he died in 1999, they asked him, what was one of the things that most stuck out in your mind when you were fighting the Russians? And what tactics did you think were the most effective? And Abdul Haq sat back and he put the stump of his leg, because his left foot was missing, he'd been blown off in a landmine, and he put his stump up on the table and he said, I never really thought about that at all. I just prayed to Allah, asked that He gave us victory, and victory came. He said, the Russians, there was once where there was a huge army standing in front of us, and we were only between 50 and 100. And the men's faces all of a sudden had fright on them, and they turned and ran, and we chased them and took some of them as prisoners. And they begged us not to send our reinforcements. And we asked them, who are the reinforcements? He said, did you not see the people behind you that were waiting? And he said, what people? He said, the whole ridge, the whole hillock behind you was filled with people, with all the latest technology and everything. Please don't send us to those people. And they looked at the ridge and it was empty. And so it's that same spirit of Khalid bin al-Waleed in which we remember something from Khalid, and it's this: never worry about numbers. Whenever the Muslims worried about numbers, that's always when they either lost or when they suffered a setback. In the Battle of Hunayn, the Muslims saw, we've got superior numbers. We're destined to win. And they suffered a setback. The Muslims in 1948, 1956, 1958, 1967, 1973 all said, we've got superior numbers. And the children of Israel, there's more of them in New York City than in the state of Israel, defeated 6 countries in 6 days. Wiped out the whole Egyptian Air Force. Because people were worried about numbers. Numbers.